Are you claustrophobic? Could you crawl 400 feet through a cave so small you need to bend and contort your body to squeeze through? On November 24th, 2009, that's exactly what 4 men, including John Jones, did while exploring a cave in Utah known as Nutty Putty. However, the thrill for Jones would soon become a nightmare, as he managed to wedge his body into a hole measuring only 10 inches by 18 inches, head first. Although he would fight, squirm, and struggle to get free, he would be unsuccessful and as a result would remain in that position for over 27 hours as rescue workers attempted to free him. Today, we are discussing the history of Nutty Putty Cave and why today, 15 years after Jones's descent, he is still there and likely will be forever. The cave was first discovered back in 1960 by a man named Dale Green who had explored it with his friends and reportedly named it Nutty Putty due to the brown, soft, putty-like clay inside, the name being a play on the children's toy Silly Putty. However, traversing such a cave was not for the faint-hearted, and although it contained over 1,400 feet of tunnels, it only had a single narrow entrance in the form of a hole located on the surface. Despite being discovered almost 65 years ago, the cave arguably saw its height in popularity around 2006, in which it was estimated over 5,000 people would enter and attempt to crawl through the cave's narrow passages every year, sometimes a line even forming on the surface. One article would even suggest that number of annual visitors to be even higher, sitting around 25,000. Although the cave was technically open to the public, thrill seekers would often attempt to enter the cave late at night, and along with lack of experience, often failed to take proper safety precautions. In fact, despite this video technically being dedicated to John Jones, it is reported that 5 other people across 3 separate expeditions had become stuck inside the cave. However, thankfully, as far as I'm aware, all those rescues ended successfully, and the cavers, or Boy Scouts, as it is reported by some, had all made it out safely. But still, the Utah School and Institutional Trust Lands Administration, who owned the land the cave occupied, began to become increasingly worried that it was only a matter of time until the smoothing of the cave resulted in a fatality. And as a result, the group closed Nutty Putty Cave to the public on May 24th, 2006, installing a gate on the entrance. This came to the dismay of many cavers, however, and over the course of the next 3 years, the gate placed on the entrance was found to be cut open on several occasions, as thrill seekers looked to illegally access the cave. Confident the act of preventing the public from entering the cave was futile, in early 2009, the owners decided they would reopen the cave to the public and allow access to those who submitted an application to prove their abilities, both as a caver and as somebody able to follow the newly required safety precautions. Then, on May 18, 2009, the Nutty Putty Cave was officially reopened and the first unauthorized cavers began crawling through it again. However, it would only be about 6 months before the initial concerns of the owners became a reality, when it was visited by med student John Edward Jones and around 10 others, including friends and family, on November 24th, 2009. Jones and the 3 others were originally part of a larger group, but separated from them in hopes of finding a segment of the cave known as the Birth Canal, which was a tight section of tunnel that the men could crawl through and would open up to a decently sized section at the end, allowing the 4 to turn around and crawl back out. Something a little more challenging for the group, who, along with Jones's younger brother, had been known to explore caves often in their youth. However, due to a mistake, Jones would not enter the birth canal and instead began climbing through a section of tunnel that had never been mapped before, and to the best of my knowledge, never explored either. He would crawl roughly 400 feet through the cave. This distance, including the distance from the entrance of Nutty Putty to the entrance of the tunnel Jones had now occupied. However, after a while of bending and squeezing through, he would hit a dead end. I'm sure that is some of my viewers' worst nightmares, but truth be told, for an experienced caver, this is not actually the end of the world. One caver on Reddit has said, "I have crawled backwards out of many passages that ended or got too tight. Crawling backwards isn't fun, but where there's a will, there's a way, and it's actually pretty hard to get permanently stuck if you don't panic. So as Jones was preparing himself to crawl backwards, he spotted an opening down below and realized that this must be the birth canal, the opening he could crawl through that would give him enough space to reposition and crawl back the other direction. So he descended into the hole the only way he could, head first. Jones would continue to descend for about what is estimated to be 5 to 6 feet until he reached an opening he couldn't fit through. The position was awkward, but he could see that the hole became wider on the other side. He just needed to push a little harder, so he sucked all the air out of his body and squeezed past the lip that was holding him back. But as he inhaled and looked around with his headlamp, he realized he was wrong. The cave did not open further like he had thought. Instead, he was faced with another dead end, this time one with nowhere to go. Of course, Jones would do what I'm sure all of us would do, and although one of his arms was pretty much pinned behind his back, he would take his free hand and try to push himself back through the opening. But now the lip that had tried to stop him from going any deeper was preventing him from leaving. Jones was stuck in a space no bigger than around 10 inches by 18 inches, with only his shins poking through the hole. This image has long since been rumored to be a photo of Jones trapped in the cave's fissure, but in actuality, it belongs to a Reddit user that was posted on the caving subreddit over 13 years ago, from a cave called Whiting's Neck Cave on the Maryland-West Virginia border. One user in the comments would point out that people had been using this picture, claiming it to be Jones, to which the original poster would respond just about 4 months ago that it had started happening right after the incident. It is also reported that the image may have been recreated in the 2019 video game Borderlands 3 as a hidden Easter egg, likely with the studio or developer behind it also believing it to be a depiction of Jones, or quite possibly unrelated altogether. However, this diagram, which has since become a morbid meme among many others, is actually how Jones is believed to have been trapped, and why it is easy to see that him escaping on his own was nearly an impossible task. To the best of my knowledge, and from the comments of several users online, it is believed that no image of Jones trapped inside the hole has ever been released. Those Jones had been with, including his younger brother, would retreat out of the cave in an effort to call for help after saying a quick prayer with Jones, who was said to be a Mormon and very religious. But due to the somewhat remote nature of where Jones was, in addition to the crawl needed to exit the cave, Jones would be alone, in the dark, upside down, for roughly 3.5 hours. A woman named Susie Matola would be the first rescue team member to arrive, and after spending nearly 20 minutes crawling through Nutty Putty Cave, she would find Jones around the time 12:30 a.m. Reportedly, Susie would say, "Hi John, my name is Susie, how's it going?" To which Jones replied, "Hi Susie, thanks for coming, but I really want to get out." Susie said that although Jones was very clearly stuck, with one arm pinned behind his back, she still felt confident in the crew's ability to rescue him, and reportedly hummed music and made small talk with Jones about getting pancakes with him after he was freed. As more and more rescuers from all over Utah began arriving, it was ultimately decided that they needed to set up a pulley system and began attaching pieces of equipment to the wall. But due to the material of the cave, these pulleys often buckled under the strain, meaning more equipment was needed, and more equipment after that. And each time when it would fail, it would take over an hour before the next attempt could occur. The pulley method had worked to save a teenager from Nutty Putty Cave back in 2006, but Jones was bigger in a harder to reach spot, and on top of that, rescuers only had access to around 6 inches of his legs. Here is a diagram roughly displaying the complex pulley system that was set up in an attempt to retrieve Jones. Jones's wife had not entered the cave, although she was aware of the trip and was contacted immediately when the rescue began. But as the hours passed and there was no word from Jones, she began to get worried and took her and John's 1-year-old baby, as well as Jones's parents, and headed to the cave. Surely she expected to find a few rescue personnel there. However, when she would come over the crest, her heart likely sank when she saw over 100 people, the majority being search and rescue team members from all over Utah, standing around the entrance. She's reported as saying, "I knew I couldn't do anything to help, but I really wanted to give him a hug when he got out. I just imagined him being really tired and scared. Utah County Sheriff's Lieutenant Tom Hogginson would approach Emily, Jones's wife, and tell her, "We'll get John out. We'll get him out for you." But despite his promising words, Emily noticed he was beginning to tear up. The crew working on rescuing Jones was on a time crunch, and the truth was that although they remained positive when speaking to Jones, he actually only had hours left to live. The issue wasn't the tight position, the warmth of the cave, dehydration, or starvation. It was the fact that Jones was upside down, and as a result, blood was slowly beginning to accumulate in his brain, with his body, and more specifically his heart, unable to push it out. Some estimate that for a normal, reasonably healthy individual, death could occur within 8 to 10 hours of being inverted, and now it was around 10 a.m. Jones had been inverted for 13. At this point, John was beginning to become unresponsive, responding sometimes and then remaining quiet for hours. But rescuers would make another grisly discovery, that even though they had finally managed to get the pulley system to work, that due to the angle of the fissure, there was no possible way for Jones to come back out the way he came without rotating his body. This means the only feasible way to remove him was to break both of his legs so they would bend around the corner. However, due to the deteriorated state Jones was in, many feared the act of purposely breaking his legs would put him into shock and kill him. The 100-plus man crew continued to work till around 6 p.m. when Brandon Kowalis arrived. However, Jones's condition began to worsen, and he reportedly began claiming to see angels and demons surrounding him. Work on his rescue stopped momentarily as a radio was brought down to Jones so his family could speak to him. They would tell Jones that they loved him, prayed for him, and reassured him of their belief that he would be okay. This call would last for about 10 minutes, and it is unclear if Jones was able to respond. After the call, work would begin again. Kowalis and others would decide to attempt to chip away at the rocks around Jones, but due to the angle, the equipment, and the time it took to move things in and out of Nutty Putty Cave, only managed to clear a section of rock roughly 18 inches by 4 inches by just before midnight. By Kowalis' estimate, it would take them anywhere from 3 to 7 days to remove enough rock, even if they managed to obtain more powerful equipment. So while the rescuers grouped in the birth canal, the opening Jones thought he was entering, they discussed their options. Things were not looking good for Jones, who had not responded in nearly an hour. So the call was made to check his vitals, and a paramedic was sent down along with Kowalis. Kowalis would take the lead, and with a stethoscope in hand, reach down into the fissure Jones occupied. Nothing. He would reach further, starting to tilt himself into the hole to reach as high up on his torso as possible. He reported hearing a faint noise, but no verifiable pulse. The noise possibly being caused by his own shaking as he supported himself from falling into the hole alongside Jones. Kowalis would make way for the paramedic, who managed to remove one of Jones's shoes in order to take his temperature, and ultimately determined that Jones had passed away. The time of death was approximately 11:52 p.m., meaning Jones had remained in that position for nearly 28 hours. It is reported that even after the family of Jones received the terrible news, they would begin to thank the rescuers for the hours and hours of work they put in to attempt to save him. However, now that Jones had passed, retrieving him would only become more difficult, as Jones had to let oxygen out of his lungs to squeeze further, and with his body swelling and stiffening, removal, not just from the fissure, but Nutty Putty as a whole, was becoming near impossible. On top of that, at the moment, the temperature inside the cave would only allow somebody to work for about 30 minutes before needing a break, and if they were to work with a recently deceased body, they would need to wear a hazmat suit and a mask, and as a result, would only be able to work for about 5 minutes before needing to return. Now, not only is the terrible news of Jones's passing getting around, so is word that they are likely not going to be able to retrieve his body. And so the hard decision was made to end the posthumous rescue efforts for Jones and leave his body in the cave for an indefinite amount of time. Nutty Putty Cave has since become permanently closed, and while some avid cavers started a petition on Facebook to keep it open, the landowner and Jones's family came to a consensus. and explosives were placed inside the cave, not too far from Jones's body, and once detonated, collapsed the 400-foot tunnel to where Jones was. Furthermore, the entrance to Nutty Putty was sealed with cement, and a memorial for Jones was placed on the entrance. John Edward Jones still remains in the same position he had succumbed in, likely from cardiac arrest from prolonged inversion, and likely will remain there for the rest of time. He was only 26 at the time and left behind a wife of around 3.5 years and a 1-year-old baby, as well as many family members and friends. The plaque placed on the entrance of Nutty Putty reads, "On November 25th, 2009, our beloved John passed away at this site. He was a loving father, a kind husband, a loyal son, and a true and cherished friend. Those who knew John best will remember his faith and his caring heart. Thank you, John, for showing us how to make eternity our covering and our rock and our salvation as we journey here on earth. We miss you and love you always." As previously stated, although there is no known or released image of Jones trapped in Nutty Putty, despite what some claim, this picture was taken of Jones by a family member that night as the group explored the cave together. Well, that's about it. If you enjoyed this video, why not check out this one about how a 17-hour-long interrogation led a man to confess to a murder he didn't commit. Subscribe, and I'll see you next time.